Meet Kang Ho, a renowned writer whose imagination birthed worlds beyond our wildest dreams. But one fateful decision in his latest novel turned his masterpiece into a nightmare. In a twist that shocked his readers, the hero he created became a traitor, unleashing the Demon King's rule over the land. Drowned in criticism and regret, Kang Ho wished for redemption. Fate answered in the most unexpected way, transporting him into the very world he crafted years before its downfall. Seoul, a vibrant city in South Korea, has placed its future in the capable hands of one individual, Jang Shi-won, esteemed as the master of the Manhwa Guild. The sole remaining member of the Manhwa Guild, apart from Shi-won, is none other than Shin Knag Ho, regarded as the world's public enemy. Shi-won bravely battles Kang Ho, standing as the world's shield against his malevolent forces. Shi-won told Kang Ho that because of the meaningless fighting initiated by the evil Kang Ho, everyone was suffering. To Kang Ho, Shi-won's talking seemed like a joke. Kang Ho asked Shi-won what he thought he was and also questioned if he was a messenger of justice. Upon hearing about justice from Kang Ho, Shi-won became furious and told Kang Ho that he was fighting on behalf of everyone. Yet Kang Ho always stood in Shi-won's way. So, what was Kang Ho, if not evil? In the crowd, everyone was shouting, Jang Shi-won, Jang Shi-won, Jang Shi-won. Shi-won also claimed that, as long as they cheered for him, he would not be taken down at any cost. The battle commenced. Shi-won gathered all his energy and launched a fierce attack on Kang Ho all at once. The attack caused a massive explosion. Shi-won's blow was enough to injure Kang Ho badly and bring him to his knees before Shi-won. Even Kang Ho's head bowed before Shi-won. His defeat was evident not only in his posture but also in the glint of defiance extinguished from his eyes. The crowd shouted with joy. The people of Seoul had always believed in Shi-won. Everyone wanted an end to Kang Ho's reign. As Shi-won defeated Kang Ho, the crowd started shouting again, calling for Kang Ho's death. Not a single person wished for Kang Ho to live on. Once again, and for the last time, Shi-won gathered his power to attack Kang Ho. Kang Ho, injured and powerless, sat ready to be attacked by Shi-won. To end Kang Ho, Shi-won threw his power at him. The attack hit Kang Ho so hard that blood spilled from his mouth, and he was thrown to the ground, far away, killing him instantly. Then Shi-won floated in the sky and announced to the crowd that all their preparations had finally borne fruit. Now, perfect freedom would descend upon this land. The people of Seoul cried with happiness as they finally gained their freedom. However, that was not the victory everyone was expecting. Suddenly, Shi-won threw a red beam of light into the sky, causing a big red circle with numerous thunderbolts, and a giant hand emerged from that circle. Everyone was shocked to see that, but Shi-won was proud of what was happening. As the giant hand approached the people, they ran as fast as possible to save their lives. However, Shi-won was laughing and saying, at last, the Demon King has descended. Now true peace. Before Shi-won could complete his speech, he heard Kang Ho's voice. Kang Ho was saying, Shi-won's true peace is, in reality, a true tyranny. Shi-won did not expect Kang Ho to be alive, yet he still told Kang Ho to open his eyes and behold the world that Shi-won had created, a creepy smile playing on his lips. And just like that, the world perished. As the story concludes, a twist emerges, revealing that it was crafted by the author. Surprisingly, the main character of the primary narrative is none other than the author himself. The writer of the story, the life of a villain-turned-savior, then thanked everyone for all the love received so far. But the reader's expectations have been shattered, as the character they were expecting to be good turned out to be evil. The protagonist, Jang Shi-won, is actually a henchman of the Demon King. He and his comrades, known as the 13 Stars, are top-level, long-standing evildoers. While for the writer, fiction is nothing but a mirror reflecting reality. The motif of this novel was the writer's own life as a student. During his school years, the writer witnessed authority that could even cover up school violence, exposing the bare face of the world and how powerful individuals could change what is considered right and wrong. For this reason, he incorporated that reality into the novel. But the readers aren't happy with the ending. They're unsatisfied with the open conclusion of the novel. Some even suggest the author should become the main character, but for that to happen, the author needs to die first to inhabit the role. All of the readers' comments made the author realize that his story really couldn't fulfill its motif. The writer closed the comment box. He was lost in thought, still thinking about what the readers had said. Remembering those comments, the writer was feeling even worse. Even one reader commented that the author seemed like a henchman intent on destroying the reader's world. The writer is helpless. He can't rewrite it at this point, even if he wants to. With no immediate changes to the story, the author decided to call it a night. While he was sleeping, some noise disturbed him. He could even feel the hard floor beneath him, though he was supposed to be in his cozy bed. When the author opened his eyes, he observed some prisoners digging something while guards were overseeing them. Suddenly, a guard approached the author and began kicking him, angrily inquiring how he could disregard Eclipse's grace. The mention of Eclipse shocked the author, who then reflected on his school-time bullying, thinking those rascals were appearing even in his dreams now. The guard further threatened him, advising him to stop acting like a useless worker. Then, the guard seized his collar and commenced punching him in the face. The author was perplexed, wondering who was assaulting him. The assailant proclaimed that the author was inept, unable to endure even a moment. Believing it all to be a dream, the author was baffled by the pain he felt. Another guard intervened, halting the first guard's assault, pointing out that the author had yet to meet his quota. Choosing to postpone the punishment, the guard left the author in suspense about whether this experience was a dream or reality, given its vividness. However, shock ensued when someone inquired about his well-being, addressing him as Kang-Ho. Approaching a pond to view his reflection, the author knelt down, momentarily feeling the ability to absorb mana at will, identifying it as congenital mana hypersensitivity. It dawned on him swiftly that he was Shin Knag Ho, recognizing his reflection in the water. He had become one of the main characters from his novel. Kang-Ho could only laugh sarcastically at the irony of fate making him Shin Knag Ho. A prisoner approached, apologizing and implying his role in the situation. Upon seeing the prisoner, the author surmised, if he's still alive, then this must be 5 years before the conclusion. He pondered how different things might have been had he become Jiang Shiwan, potentially revered as the world's hero. Yet, as things stood, the story would culminate with the Demon King's arrival, sparing only the lives of henchmen. Without altering the narrative's conclusion, the author faced a grim fate. Fortunately, the author was aware of an escape route from this predicament. As expected, after taking over Shin Knag Ho's body, the author feels as if the past and experiences of Shin Knag Ho are his own. In the character information of Knag Ho, his level is 10. His class is Assassin, his constellation is None, and for skills, he is at level 1 for both short-distance leap and traverse teleportation. Due to the low stamina and skill level of Knag Ho, the author was very disappointed. The author now regrets giving Knag Ho a weakness like congenital mana hypersensitivity simply because he is a villain. The author pondered a solution in his mind. Then another prisoner called Knag Ho and asked him if he was okay. Knag Ho reassured the other prisoner, saying that it was nothing and there was no need to worry. The prisoner was still concerned for Knag Ho and asked him if he should request a break from the guard. Knag Ho replied to him sarcastically, stating that if they were the kind of people who allowed others to rest according to their condition, they wouldn't have dragged them to a place like this in the first place. In this detention center, created by the criminal organization Eclipse, rookie hunters, who can use mana are forced to work like slaves to mine mana stones. The author reassured the prisoner, advising him not to worry but to focus on mining the stones. Then the prisoner whispered to the author, asking if he was contemplating escaping. The author told him to forget about it and go to work before the guards started beating him. Additionally, the author warned him not to engage in any reckless behavior. The prisoner said okay to him. The author told himself that he had done all he could by warning the prisoner. This character was a motif he had created for him. However, he can't make any changes to the novel yet, as it might jeopardize his escape. The author begins to dig mana stones like others and also relocates the stones from one place to another. Suddenly, the author heard some noise. When he turned around, he saw a guard expressing anger towards a prisoner. While the guard's attention was diverted to the newcomers, the prisoner attempted to escape. The guard threatened the prisoner angrily to watch carefully. The prisoner would take responsibility for any reckless behavior. And right then, the guard thrust his sword into the prisoner's body, killing him. Every prisoner in that prison was stunned to see that. That guard was too cruel. Not only was he satisfied with stabbing the prisoner once, but he also stabbed him several times. The prisoner died a very cruel death. The splashes of the prisoner's blood splashed onto the other prisoners. Even though everyone wanted to, no one could do anything for the prisoner. They were all helplessly watching his cruel death. Despite knowing this from the start, the actions of the prisoner disappointed the author, as he persisted in doing something foolish despite the author's warnings. The author stood silently beside the death row prisoner for some time. After killing that prisoner, the guard asked the author why he didn't act up like last time. Since there was no one there to stop him, the guard would kill him too. But the author couldn't care less about dying. The author asked the guard to let him go to the toilet. The guard laughed, thinking the author was too afraid and needed to go to the toilet. Consequently, he allowed him to proceed. However, the guard escorted him outside the toilet and warned the author to return within a minute, or else the toilet would become his grave. After entering the toilet, the author discovered the dead bodies of prisoners lying on the floor. It was expected by the author, so he only concentrated on searching for what he had come there for. The author walks through the dead bodies. The guard was counting the seconds outside the toilet for Kang-Ho. The author found what he was searching for inside the toilet and began to create something on the floor using his blood. The guard continued counting, 50, 49, and kept counting down. On the other hand, the author drew a symbol on the floor, and the symbol began to glow. The author knew that the person he was looking for was watching him, and that person was someone who had a penchant for tragedies, trials, and depression. The guard warned Kang-Ho once more to come out quickly, as there were only 10 seconds left. But the author didn't care about the guard's words. He asked the person he was waiting for if he wasn't curious about how a low-level person like Kang-Ho could summon him. The author further stated that if he were to stay here a little longer, as described in the novel, then the person he was waiting for would appear later. Furthermore, if the author hesitated for another day, the hope that the world is seeking would slip further out of reach. This is what that person would say to the author to persuade him to reply to his summons. The author also said that since he would become the entertainment that the person was looking for, the person who's able to use that person's ability the most effectively is the author. The author knew the person would appear, and that person is the Dimension Looter, the main constellation, who made a contract with Shin Knag Ho in the novel. Looter answered. Since Kang-Ho had gotten his attention, Looter decided to let him borrow his power for a moment. Looter also told Kang-Ho to prove himself to him. The author assured the Looter to simply sit back and watch. After gaining power from Looter, Kang-Ho's abilities reached their maximum potential, which means Kang-Ho has reached the maximum level in both skills, short distance leap and traverse teleportation. After 1 minute had elapsed, the guard entered the toilet. Upon entering, the room was silent, with wisps of smoke lingering in the air. The guard strained to see through the haze, but before he could comprehend the situation, Kang-Ho suddenly attacked. Before the guard could comprehend how Kang-Ho had become so much more powerful, Kang-Ho disappeared. The toilet was empty. The guard saw that Kang-Ho wasn't there. But Kang-Ho was just behind him and, in a moment, pushed a rod into the guard's throat. Without understanding how it was happening, the guard died. The author then thanked the guard, acknowledging that it was because of him that he had decided to leave the place that day. Looter found Kang-Ho interesting and told Kang-Ho that the contract was complete. The author didn't care if the contract was over, as he had already accomplished what he wanted with the power. With Looter's power, even if just for a moment, Kang-Ho avenged himself. Kang-Ho received a notification about registering a weapon. Now Kang-Ho is not going to look back. It was still the same night when everything changed in the author's life. From being the writer of the novel to becoming one of the main characters of a novel. The author had just killed the guard and registered a new weapon. He noticed a petrol can lying on the floor, with petrol spilling out of it. He took that petrol can and spread the petrol all over the toilet room. As the first step for the escape plan, he secured a second rank warden's uniform. The second step was arson. He lit up a lighter and threw it into the petrol splashes, causing a big explosion. And the third step was to escape, through none other than the front gate. The massive explosion grabbed everyone's attention. The guards couldn't understand how the fire started. The fire was in front of Building 18. The guards wanted to know who did it. But first, they needed to call the fire department. All the guards were running to control the fire and the situation. One of the guards instructed everyone to follow the manual while he rode in a jeep. Then, he told the driver guard to proceed to the crematorium and hurry up. The driver guard obeyed, responding, "Roger." One of the guards, addressing someone as Rank 2 Warden, inquired if he was being switched with the current Rank 2 Warden in charge of their unit. Then, it became apparent that the person in the jeep was Kang Hu, who had already disguised himself as one of the guards. Kang Hu confirmed, "Yeah," and also mentioned that someone had just escaped from Building 18. The guard was shocked to hear that. Kang Hu reported a prisoner escaping through the northwest fence and questioned the guards as to why they hadn't pursued yet. The driver guard apologized and said he would start right away. The path that heads northwest from the fence is Chungmyeong Mountain. At first glance, the route seemed like a good escape path since it was dark, unguarded, and complex. But in reality, it was laden with traps set by Eclipse, making it the most dangerous route. The author planned to use this information, which was exclusively known to the wardens, to orchestrate his escape. He instructed the guards to intercept him as he attempted to flee, emphasizing that even if he managed to evade capture, he would likely head towards Chungmyeong Mountain. Therefore, their objective was to ensure his return, even if it meant retrieving his lifeless body. The guard understood his instructions. At the gate to Chungmyeong Mountain, the gate guard said the password, Warang, to which the guard accompanying the author responded with cigarettes. Subsequently, the gate guard cleared the way for the author's team to proceed. The author relished finally leaving the confines of the fence. Their jeep ventured through the jungle towards Chungmyeong Mountain. One of the guards commented to the author that he must be tired, given the events unfolding in Building 18. The author agreed, adding that killing the prisoners would be way easier since those inmates just wouldn't listen. Another guard concurred, labeling the prisoners as hunters in name only, deriding them as just losers. One guard, growing suspicious, queried the author about how long he had been on duty in Building 18. Sensing the precariousness of the situation, the author replied that he had arrived the day before yesterday. When the guard suggested that the author must have then been working in Unit 9, the author agreed, despite the inherent inconsistency, as Unit 9 could not have been formed the day before yesterday. It didn't exist. Caught in his deception, still dressed as a guard, the author offered a sarcastic smile in acknowledgement as the jeep continued its journey toward Chungmyeong Mountain. For no particular reason, the author drew his sword to deal with the guards. First, he dispatched one of the guards with his blade. The sudden action caused the jeep to halt abruptly, propelling the guard against the windshield, breaking it and ejecting him through the shattered glass. Witnessing this, the remaining guard became enraged. He channeled his power into his hand and hurled it at the author. However, his first attempt missed, striking the jeep's ceiling and creating a hole. The guard was astonished at how the author had evaded his initial strike. He challenged the author, questioning how he dared to deceive them, before launching another, more forceful attack, aiming to terminate the author's existence. The guard felt a momentary satisfaction in believing he had succeeded in eliminating the author. Yet, he was taken aback to glimpse the author alive and momentarily outside the jeep in the side mirror before disappearing from view. Suddenly, the author's sword pierced through the skylight's glass, descending sharply. In an instant, the author eliminated the guard by driving his sword through the guard's neck. The author entered through the skylight, having shattered its glass with his sword, then dispatched the guard and expelled him from the jeep. However, he lamented the excessive use of his mana. Observing other guards pursuing him in their jeeps via the side mirror, he pondered if they were on patrol, not anticipating their presence. Yet, he smiled, recognizing this as potentially his final obstacle. Exiting the vehicle, he leaped from the road to the lower terrain alongside it. Upon landing, the author was taken aback. A figure confronted him, remarking on his ability to eliminate 2 wardens and escape, derisively addressing him as a low-level scum. The author was surprised not only by the confrontation but also by the red mark visible above the challenger's head, indicating a contract with the constellation. The author curiously speculated about the nature of his adversary's powers. Then, the author observed a skillfully crafted connector panel behind the individual, detailing his power as a constellation with the ability to track mana. The author mused, the ability to track mana? As he saw his glowing hand absorbing the mana, he realized how the person had located him. Yet, the author remarked that this situation turned out to be advantageous. The individual was puzzled, wondering how this could possibly be considered a good outcome for the author. The author could see the constellation the person was contracted with in the red mark above his head for a specific reason. Regarding the individual's skill panel, it displayed his skill as a constellation with the ability to track mana. By defeating another hunter, the author could loot them of their contracted constellation. The author received a system notification stating, "You were able to loot this target." This presented the author with the opportunity to use constellation loot for the first time. According to the system notification, the author has the opportunity to loot this target. It's a significant moment for the author, as this presents a chance to utilize constellation loot for the first time. However, if the target has made a contract with a constellation, the target is likely at least level 100. The author recognizes the need to avoid a direct confrontation. Thus, the author opts for a strategy to lure the target and attack instead, initiating a super fast run. Observing the author's choice to flee rather than engage, the target smiles, perceiving the author as significantly inferior. The author dashes toward a large tree and conceals himself there. Meanwhile, the target mocks the author, urging him to do his best to hide, confident in his ability to perceive everything. The target then commences a scan of the trees, searching diligently for the author, axe in hand. Upon noticing warning marks on one of the trees, the target is pleased, thinking he has located the author. In a burst of fury, he hurls his axe, splitting the tree in two. Yet, the author is not there. Confused by the author's disappearance, the target is caught off guard when suddenly, a sword pierces his throat from behind. The author, having strategically and wisely wielded his power at the opportune moment, succeeds in defeating the target by thrusting the sword through his throat. The author then chides the target, pointing out the folly in underestimating an opponent and the mistake of assuming a proximity dealer would simply discard his weapon. After withdrawing the sword, the target succumbs to his injuries. Following this, the author receives a notification alert confirming the elimination of the target and the acquisition of his contract with Skillful Connector. Further notifications reveal that Skillful Connector is now under the author's control, incapable of escape except through extinction or contract termination. Additionally, all abilities of Skillful Connector are transferred to the author. Curious about his newly acquired skills, the author explores his skill panel, where he discovers the addition of the mana tracking ability and night vision, both at their maximum levels. The author is elated with his accomplishments and the significant expansion of his capabilities. Utilizing his newly acquired night vision power, the author scans the jungle and confirms there are no pursuers in proximity. However, a sudden cough catches his attention, and covering his mouth with his hand, he notices blood dripping onto the ground. The sight of blood on his hand leads him to question whether he overexerted himself. Recalling the events during his concealment from the target, the author had taken a significant risk. To evade detection, he suppressed his mana hypersensitivity, concealed his presence, and concentrated all of his mana into a stone. This was crucial. Otherwise, he would inadvertently absorb all surrounding mana explosively. Thus, to maintain control, he suppressed his mana hypersensitivity and disposed of the stone, effectively misleading the target and causing him to attack the incorrect tree. This strategic deception allowed the author to successfully ambush and eliminate the target. However, approaching the target required the author to perform a short-distance leap, a maneuver that taxed his body severely. He realizes that any further exertion could be fatal. Recognizing the need for safety, the author begins to move. After some time, he locates the vehicle he had been searching for, a truck transporting sand used for purifying mana stones. Making a calculated jump from a cliff, he lands in the truck, burying himself in the sand. As he lies there, reflections on his actions surface, his elimination of 3 guards during his escape, a deviation not present in the novel. He contemplates the importance of ensuring the future remains unaltered while he grows stronger, so he can leverage his knowledge. Despite his significant impact on his immediate surroundings, he doubts these actions will alter the future significantly, considering his pathetic weight in the broader scope of the world. The truck continues its journey beside a river, and seated at the back, the author takes in the scenery. Despite the beauty of the view, he finds it irritatingly pleasant, a stark contrast to the turmoil within him and the challenges he faces. In an office within the mine's administrative building, the mine manager dismisses the concern about manpower shortages, confidently asserting to his subordinate that they can simply recruit new laborers to mine the mana stones. He instructs his subordinate to proceed with the day's tasks, which the subordinate acknowledges. The mine manager, a cigarette hanging from his lips, muses about Kang Ho's cunning. He admires Kang Ho's ability to catch them unawares and his audacity to exit through the front gate as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, despite his weakened state from excessive mana use, which has impeded his stamina recovery, the author manages to reach a telephone booth. Feeling the toll of his actions, he dials a number, initiating a crucial call. The narrative then switches back to the mine manager, who is intrigued by the recent events. He ponders over the fact that a level 10 assassin, whose residence remains elusive, has successfully eliminated both a level 45 and a level 55 individual, one of whom was under the protection of a constellation. From the telephone booth, the author, identifying himself as Kang Ho, makes contact with someone. The person on the other end of the line affectionately addresses him as Kang Ho Appa. The author explains his location in front of Taejin Station and requests a favor from the listener. Simultaneously, the mine manager finds Kang Ho's actions and the unfolding situation fascinating, considering it a compelling challenge. He looks forward to the pursuit, viewing it as an entertaining hunt that will test his skills and resources. Then the scene shifted to where Kang Ho thanked Han Soyeon for treating him when he asked her out of the blue. Soyeon asked Kang Ho what on earth happened, and also inquired if he had gone to a war zone. Kang Ho replied that Eclipse had kidnapped him. Soyeon was shocked to learn that. She asked Kang Ho if he had been dragged to a mana stone mine. She also mentioned that those guys are famous for kidnapping hunters. Kang Ho asserts that to mine mana stones, mana is essential. Thus, low-level hunters like him can't help but turn into prey for the other hunters. Despite that, Kang Ho trusted Han Seoyeon and got in touch with her because she still loves Shin Knag Ho. Soyeon apologized to Kang Ho. She was crying and said that if she had kept in touch with him more frequently after that happened, he wouldn't have had to go through this. At the time of their breakup, she was a newbie hunter who had recently awakened. Right now, she's a level 150 veteran contracted with a constellation. If she had been with Kang Ho back then, she would have been dragged to the Chungmyeong detention center as well. Kang Ho told Soyeon that's enough caring from her. He also warned that nothing good would come out of getting involved with him now. Eclipse might even track her. Soyeon told Kang Ho that she's level 150 now. She's at a level where average hunters can't mess with her so carelessly. Kang Ho told Soyeon that she didn't need to worry about him. Also, he advised her that she just needed to use that power for herself now. Soyeon gave Kang Ho some clothes and put a decent amount of cash and a formatted smartphone inside. It should be fairly untraceable. Kang Ho asked Soyeon if it looks like her guild is dipping its toes into a somewhat gray border. That's right. Back then, and even now, a guild suits Soyeon. Soyeon asked Kang Ho if he had any plans of joining their guild, just like back in the day. They could once again. Before Soyeon could speak any further, Kang Ho stopped her by calling her name and telling her not to stay trapped in the past. Hearing this, Soyeon became upset. Tears welled up in her eyes. But she said, right? That's what you thought. Soyeon informed Kang Ho that she had taken care of his request. She also mentioned that she had a friend who is a leader, and the details are on the phone. Soyeon told Kang Ho, take care, Appa. Stay well. Kang Ho thanked Soyeon and wished her well too. Then, Kang Ho requested that Mr. Driver take him to Taejin Station. Mr. Driver asked Kang Ho if he would like to turn on the radio if he didn't mind. Kang Ho gave his approval. The radio broadcasted news that the Manhwa Guild had assassinated the entire White Rose Mercenary Corps. After Judgment Day, the White Rose Corps, based in Jongseon, Gangwon-do, emerged as a rapidly rising criminal organization. The scene shifts to Judgment Day, which arrived suddenly and quietly. A man driving his car commented to his partner on the unusual quietness for a weekend due to the absence of cars. However, when he turned to look at his wife, he was struck with horror upon seeing her skull exposed. Then, a Grim Reaper appeared and killed him with its scythe. Multiple Grim Reapers were seen roaming around and destroying the city. A reporter, while delivering breaking news from a rooftop in Gangnam, Seoul, noted the sky turning purple in the distance. Before she could continue her report, she was killed by a monster. Kang Ho narrated the emergence of monsters and the peculiar skies over dungeons. In the chaos, those who acquired powers were called hunters. This situation led many to believe in a divine judgment. Initially, hunters targeted monsters in the name of gods, but eventually, they began hunting people for no reason. As society neared collapse, Zhang Shiwan emerged as a savior. Centered in Seoul, he founded the Manhwa Guild, serving as a helper, protector, and healer of the people, making Seoul a sought-after safe haven. Kang Ho reflected on the White Rose Corps, which had been tracked by Hunter Zhang Shiwan for plotting a terror attack at Exit 11 of Gangnam Station in Seoul. The White Rose Corps is not recognized by Kang Ho as a terrorist organization. While the driver expressed admiration for Zhang Shiwan for eliminating what was perceived as a terrorist group, Kang Ho was aware that the terror attacks were not their doing. To the driver, the fact that Shiwan is a Korean hunter is a source of great pride. However, Kang Ho understood that the entire situation was orchestrated by Zhang Shiwan. The driver shared with Kang Ho that his son had recently awakened as a hunter and dreamed of joining Zhang Shiwan's guild. On the other hand, Kang Ho contemplated the consequences of opposing Zhang Shiwan by exposing his schemes. He knew that if he did, Shiwan would label him the villain, leading everyone to call for Kang Ho's death. This concern led Kang Ho to seek affiliation with the mercenary corps rather than a guild, which he believed could be more easily influenced by Shiwan. Upon arriving at their destination, Kang Ho considered that working solely on commissions from the mercenary corps would be the safest option for him. Li Yerin then greeted Kang Ho, mentioning that she had learned about him from Seoyeon. Opting for caution, Kang Ho introduced himself to Yerin as Young Sung-kyu. Yerin welcomed him and proposed a collection job, which Kang Ho declined in favor of more challenging and rewarding tasks. Surprised by his request given his purported level 10 status, Yerin questioned his confidence. Kang Ho affirmed his level, leading Yerin to caution him that excessive bravery could be foolhardy. Suddenly shifting the mood, Yerin intensely inquired if Kang Ho was interested in a job that would involve her cleaning up a dead body. Kang Ho expressed his excitement, emphasizing that being a mercenary is about possessing skills, regardless of one's level. It felt odd for Kang Ho to meet a character he had taken so much care to create. The Observer of Chaos, a neutral-leaning constellation with the ability to distort and block sight, was Yerin. As a mage and buffer, she had made a contract with a mid-upper level constellation, a character created to one day face off against the 13 stars. Thus, Kang Ho needed to win Yerin's trust. Yerin had told Kang Ho that he just needed abilities, regardless of his level. In response, Kang Ho reminded her what she would be if she weren't a mercenary. Yerin had replied to Kang Ho that reality and spirit are different. Kang Ho also replied to Yerin that prejudice and truth are different. Hearing this, Yerin smiled a bit and agreed to show his skills. Yerin and Kang Ho stood facing each other at a distance, preparing for a fight. Yerin declared that she would judge one thing: whether Kang Ho could evade her skill. Kang Ho told Yerin that she just wanted to see if he could at least protect his body. Yerin confirmed he was correct, adding that being able to dodge means Kang Ho could create opportunities to attack. Yerin started using her power. Kang Ho could hardly see anything but realized that creating puppets using fog enabled him to track even in faraway places. Kang Ho thought that this was the fog tracker, and it wasn't an attack skill, so he wouldn't die even if he got hit. But if he couldn't dodge, traces would remain, and the test would end immediately. Kang Ho shouted that they should begin. Yerin stated she was starting. Then, Yerin released the fog tracker toward Kang Ho. As the fog crept towards Kang Ho, he also prepared himself for the impending attack. When the fog attacked Kang Ho, Yerin noticed Kang Ho was no longer there, leaving her confused. She was surprised to see Kang Ho running on the window glass of a building, which made no sense to her, as even jumping a meter would be difficult at that level. Yerin pondered whether Kang Ho was that proficient in using the assassin's basic skill of short-distance leap. Realizing Kang Ho wasn't just boastful, Yerin then shot another fog tracker and challenged Kang Ho, questioning if he could dodge it this time too. She released a more powerful fog tracker towards Kang Hu, which was about to reach him. However, upon seeing the fog tracker near, Kang Hu smiled, and just as the fog tracker was in front of him, Yeren was momentarily pleased to finally trace Kang Hu. Yet, she was shocked to see Kang Hu had dodged it again, wondering if Kang Hu had used traverse teleportation just before that. Before Yeren could further comprehend, Kang Hu crept up behind her, pressing his sword against her neck, suggesting they end the test there. Surprised by Kang Hu's moves, Yeren smiled slightly, recognizing Kang Hu's abilities. Kang Hu realized Yeren was faster than he had anticipated, acknowledging her prowess as a mercenary commander. Yeren inquired if Kang Hu had received prior training, to which Kang Hu replied negatively. Yeren remarked those were not movements a level 10 could perform. Kang Hu, eager to know his standing, asked if he had passed. Yeren affirmed, adding she believes she could commission him as if he were level 50, which was good news for Kang Hu. Kang Hu took a ride with Yeren in her microbus, during which Yeren inquired if Kang Hu was interested in the bulletproof glass of the vehicle. She mentioned having been troubled by an annoying gunman recently. Kang Hu queried, "A gunner?" To which Yeren responded happily that she had been receiving a lot of attention from the Eclipse group. Yeren's fog tracker handed Kang Hu a paper, which Yeren explained was a commission to track a wanted criminal. She identified herself as the commissioner and stated that this commission would prove quite useful to him. The commission detailed that in Gyeonggi-do Ozan, within the abandoned ruins dungeon, was Kim Mukyeon, a level 50 mage, who had requested the retrieval of the third-rank item, Vartaraz's shoes. The conversation then returned to Kang Hu, who asked if his task was to bring the criminal back alive. Yeren clarified that Kang Hu was authorized to kill him due to the many civilian deaths Kim Mukyeon had caused, adding that the Hunter National Security Agency would endorse this action. Kang Hu acknowledged her instructions, ready to commence immediately. Upon reaching the destination, Yeren pointed out that the criminal would likely be hidden, making the search challenging due to the dungeon's vastness. However, Kang Hu saw this as an advantageous start, being familiar with it as Shin Kang Hu's hideout from the novel, and noted the presence of useful middle bosses within. Suddenly, Kang Hu noticed evil rabbits behind him. Realizing their presence, he deliberately cut his hand, and the sight of the dripping blood drove the red-eyed rabbits into a frenzy, prompting them to attack. Kang Hu employed traverse teleportation and short-distance leap techniques to defeat the evil rabbits, contemplating Yeren's instruction that after retrieving the commissioned item, he could handle the remainder as he saw fit. Yeren then questioned Kang Hu about his desired reward, to which he replied that his only wish was to obtain a dungeon raid license, specifically for dungeons with many middle and last bosses. After dealing with the rabbit threat, a middle boss emerged behind Kang Hu, marking the beginning of his true challenge. Kang Hu expressed to Ventus, the middle boss standing in a building, his pleasure in meeting him. Ventus replied to Kang Hu, stating he would kill him. Kang Hu noticed a notification above Ventus' head, indicating, "You are able to loot this target." Kang Hu advised Ventus not to merely stand there, talking. Subsequently, Ventus, resembling a massive, deadly laser beam, struck the ground in front of Kang Hu. Ventus dashed towards Kang Hu and commenced attacking him with his sword. Ventus then proceeded with super speed to finish Kang Hu. Ventus also cast an illusion skill, creating multiple shadows of himself attacking Kang Hu, all wielding swords. One nearly struck Kang Hu. At the last moment, Kang Hu utilized his traverse teleportation power, stepping aside and dodging the attack easily. Kang Hu used his mana detection skill, for every shadow attack seemed as powerful as Ventus' full might. However, he then detected the true source of the attack. Kang Hu employed his short-distance leaping power to reach the real Ventus and inserted a knife into his body, severely injuring Ventus. Ventus attempted to strike Kang Hu, hoping to exchange damage with his sword, but Kang Hu again used his traverse teleportation power, appearing swiftly behind Ventus. Kang Hu declared that Ventus was only a middle boss in name, critiquing his crude combat skills. Without hesitation, Kang Ho struck Ventus on the backside of the knee, exacerbating Ventus's wound. Then, Kang Ho equipped a weapon from his inventory, as indicated by a notification. With this new weapon, Kang Ho inserted the sword into Ventus' neck. He pushed the sword further into Ventus's neck, overpowering any resistance from Ventus. Kang Ho then finished off Ventus, the middle boss. As Ventus began to vanish, Kang Ho received a notification stating he had stolen the skill illusion from Ventus. Kang Ho felt satisfied upon completing another task. The rewards from defeating Ventus glowed behind him, and turning, Kang Ho noticed something glowing. Another group of hunters observed the entire fight from a distance. One hunter noticed that the reward from Ventus included a solatium, and there were not just one but two of them. He pointed this out to his older brother, noting the rarity of such items. The older brother, Jo Youngjae, a guardian of Ozen rank 3, mused on Kang Ho's precision in striking Ventus at his weak point. A female hunter, referring to Youngjae as boss, mentioned she had seen Kang Ho at the market, where he was purchasing Severo brisket, kobold blood, and anesthetics for monsters, presumably preparing for a monster hunt in the dungeon and subsequent farming. This revelation made Youngjae pause, his thoughts lingering on the rare solatium item. Another member of Youngjae's team commented on Kang Ho's apparent skills as an assassin, noting that he was unfamiliar to them. Youngjae, watching Kang Ho's combat prowess, considered that Kang Ho was not just any hunter, certainly not one who belonged in a dungeon of this level. The female hunter in Youngjae's group attempted to flatter her boss by suggesting Kang Ho was no match for Youngjae and proposed they should confront Kang Ho, believing Youngjae capable of subduing him. Youngjae, slightly annoyed, dismissed her suggestion, revealing his strategy to let Kang Ho exhaust himself, making him easier to loot later. The female hunter, chuckling, acknowledged this as a typical move from her boss, suggesting they simply wait and follow Kang Ho discreetly. Meanwhile, Kang Ho reviewed his notifications, noting his advancement to level 16 and the requirement to reach level 20 for the next basic skill. He allocated all his points into stamina, reasoning that with his congenital mana hypersensitivity under control, there was no immediate need to invest points into mana. Kang Ho consumed the solatium to harness its energy, particularly aiming to enhance his stamina for the time being. After taking a bite, he felt revitalized. Holding the solatium, he elaborated on its calming and pain-relieving properties, noting its effectiveness as a suppressant for mana hypersensitivity. He acknowledged the rarity of solatium in regular dungeons, attributed to its natural growth and the challenges in mass production. Kang Ho mentioned that only one person in the country knew how to cultivate it, residing at what was formerly known as the DMZ, a considerable distance away. He expressed his intention to prepare and travel there to purchase as much solatium as possible, highlighting the urgency due to his condition that could have compromised him during the fight. However, he also recognized the need for substantial funds to acquire the solatium. The narrative then transitions to Yeren, who was driving and speaking on the phone. She commented on the declining call quality over the past year and the increasing interference. The person on the other end mentioned that the disruption might be due to the influence of Eclipse or Black Lion, suggesting the situation could deteriorate further. Yeren acknowledged that her involvement with Eclipse might be causing her difficulties. Despite the challenges, she remarked on her adaptability to constant vigilance. The conversation then shifted to the caller, who sought Yeren's recommendation for a hunter due to a staffing shortage, implying a need to contact someone reliable. Yeren hesitated, unsure if she could suggest a hunter that would meet the caller's expectations, revealing that the caller was Mr. Zhang Shiwan. Yeren informed Shiwan that she believed he would reject them all from the start. Observing the hunter's forms, Shiwan suggested to Yeren that they might need to adjust the standards slightly. He expressed his desire to focus on nurturing the lower levels first. Yeren considered this, and then told him that there was indeed a hunter like that. Shiwan asked, "Really?" Yeren responded that she believed he needed a bit more time, and added that she was hesitant to jump to conclusions just yet. With the hunter's form in his hand, Shiwan told Yeren that her recommendations had always been accurate. He lamented the loss of potential due to unforeseen incidents, to which Yeren replied that it was in the past and not worth worrying about. She mentioned she would continue to monitor the situation closely and would inform Shiwan if the individual in question was verified. Yeren then inquired if Shiwan had any useful information to share. At that moment, a crime investigator entered. Upon seeing the investigator, Shiwan mentioned he had come across insider information regarding certain crime syndicates and promised to send it to Yeren through secure mail. Yeren thanked him for his assistance. Shiwan humbly stated that he was always willing to provide her with such information whenever needed. Shiwan then reflected on the Manhwa Guild's need for a wide array of talents, but was interrupted as his men had apprehended one of the hunters from the list. He assured Yeren that if she sent someone competent, he would ensure they received the best treatment, despite Shiwan's hidden malicious activities. Yeren, with a deep sigh, questioned Shiwan on his unrealistic expectations for someone who had just received their first commission. The narrative then shifted to Kong-Hu, who found himself in combat with another monster. Using his dagger with adept skill, Kong-Hu managed to wound the creature. He delivered a swift strike to the monster's hand, which belonged to the middle boss, Ibria, causing it to bleed profusely. Ibria, enraged by the attack, extended his hand to an extraordinary length in an attempt to capture Kong-Hu. This middle boss, known for his skill in abduction, aimed at Kong-Hu and firmly grasped what he thought was his target. However, to Ibria's confusion, he found himself holding a big rock instead. This was due to Kong-Hu's use of illusion magic, cleverly deceiving Ibria. Kong-Hu was aware that the abduction skill's wind-up action created a significant vulnerability, which he planned to exploit. As expected, Ibria, still believing in his successful capture, hurled the rock towards Kong-Hu. Everything proceeded as Kong-Hu had anticipated, including being seemingly struck and buried by the rock. Yet, what Ibria witnessed was merely an illusion created by Kong-Hu, leaving him momentarily shocked. Before Ibria could grasp the situation, Kong-Hu used his traverse teleportation ability to appear behind him. With a swift motion, Kong-Hu drew his sword from his inventory and delivered a decisive stab to Ibria from behind, ultimately defeating him. Removing his sword from Ibria, now slick with her blood, Kong-Hu observed several notifications. One for defeating a middle boss, another for leveling up, and a decision to invest all his newly acquired stats into stamina, noting also the need to save Solatium. Kong-Hu received additional notifications, one indicating he had acquired the target skill, looting, and another relating to his new abduction skill with a proficiency level of max, allowing him to summon targets within a fixed radius. Eager to test this new abduction ability, Kong-Hu focused on a dagger on the floor. Mirroring the skill he had just witnessed, he extended his hand an extraordinary distance and retrieved the dagger, discovering that his power was effective on objects and could potentially be used to cancel motion. Throughout this encounter, Young Jae and his team had been observing Kong-Hu. One team member remarked on Kong-Hu's bravery, while Young Jae was notably shocked at the sight of an assassin defeating Ibria without the aid of a single tanker. Observing Kong-Hu's attempts to utilize his new skill to cancel motion, a female hunter on Youngji's team expressed curiosity about Kong-Hu's actions. A male hunter, uncertain about Kong-Hu's intentions, speculated whether Kong-Hu was working on raising his skill proficiency. He also queried Young Jae about the possibility of undermining Kong-Hu. Young Jae, momentarily silent and visibly stressed by watching Kong-Hu's combat, did not respond. When his team called on him again, Young Jae, frustrated, demanded silence from his team, reminding them of his earlier strategy to target Kong-Hu once he became exhausted. His team, taken aback by his outburst, agreed to follow his directive. The narrative then transitions to the desolate dungeon of Gyeonggi-do Ozin. Here, Kim Mukyeon was found perusing a letter while consuming his solatium. The letter revealed that the Black Lion had conditionally approved Mukyeon's request to join their ranks, with a directive to relay insider information concerning Blue Eyes to the mercenary corps led by Lee Yaren. However, it was revealed that the letter was not intended for Mukyeon. He had discovered it on the corpse of its rightful owner, having eliminated the hunters sent by the Black Lion to apprehend him and discovering the letter among their belongings. Mukyeon considered this turn of events favorable, noting Lee Yaren's eagerness to apprehend him and mentioning his interest in the eclipse, though he deemed the Black Lion a satisfactory alternative. With a smile, Mukyeon anticipated his return to Taejeon after a prolonged absence. Mukyeon, detecting Kanghu's presence outside the dungeon, sensed an opportunity for confrontation. By knocking on a wall, he summoned forth some wild monster dogs, signaling them that it was time to hunt, thus setting the stage for a potential confrontation with Kanghu. Upon receiving the Mukyeon signal, the wild monster wolves dashed towards Kanghu. When those aggressive wolves reached him, Kanghu took out a meat steak from his inventory for the wolves. Mukyeon was not expecting that, as the wolves were eating the meat, because they were not the type to get so excited over normal meat. While the wolves were eating, Kanghu took out his dagger and stabbed one of the wolves with it. Then he stabbed the second wolf and the third one. Mukyeon was shocked to witness his pets being defeated this way. Kanghu explained that they had gone crazy to eat this for a reason. He had prepared it specifically for their taste buds. After being killed by Kanghu, the dogs started to disappear. He warned Mukyeon to take this as a warning. He also added that if Mukyeon treasured his life, he should give up the items he stole. Mukyeon became furious and challenged Kanghu to take it if he could. Kanghu agreed that he should do it his way and began dashing to reach Mukyeon. Mukyeon laughed and remarked that Kanghu seemed well prepared, but it appeared he lacked brain cells. He also wondered about Kanghu, questioning what kind of idiot would head straight into the enemy camp. The hunter planted some mana traps in the building so that whenever any enemy enters, they would step on one of the mana traps and explode, dying instantly. But Kanghu could see those mana traps with his mana tracking power. He then used his short-distance leap power to navigate through the mana traps without stepping on any of them. Mukyeon became angrier with Kanghu. Kanghu ran through mana traps, but none of them were blasted because of his short-distance power. Mukyeon, filled with anger, told Kanghu that if he thought he had scared him, he was mistaken. Kanghu observed the Fighter of Chaos panel depicting the hunter, which stated, Evil-leaning constellation. A constellation with the ability to make the enemy disoriented and lose vision. Mukyeon claimed he was a precious person whom a constellation watches over. He also told Kanghu that he would show him the black magic of hell. The fight commenced. Kanghu utilized both traverse teleportation and short-distance leap to engage in combat with Mukyeon. He guessed that Mukyeon was around level 50 and described the hunter as a black mage with a disorienting constellation. So, it was clear to him what Mukyeon would do. Then Mukyeon tried to back a bit to lure him in and let Kanghu chase after him. Mukyeon smiled and told Kanghu that he couldn't dodge this time. Then he used his Seize Vision power. However, Kanghu didn't want the hunter's Seize Vision power to affect him before he reached the boundary between the dark and light. As soon as Kanghu reached the dark part, he covered his eyes with his dagger. The hunter exclaimed to Kanghu, how dare he knew the only method to defend himself. Kanghu replied, of course he knew it, because he is the one who created this ability. Mukyeon, furious at all his failed attempts to attack Kanghu and before understanding the situation, Kanghu seized Mukyeon tightly with his power of abduction. Mukyeon realized that was a monster skill and claimed that it didn't have a wind-up action, thus deeming it a cheat. But Kanghu denied that and said it was just a motion cancellation. Without wasting any time, Kang Ho stabbed his dagger into Mukyun's body. Then he took out his dagger from the hunter's body, causing a lot of blood to splash from the wound. Then Mukyun began to employ his final weapon, mana-burning power, that forced Kang Ho to take a few steps back. He told Kang Ho that he would burn him to death, but his continuous fire speed was irregular, forcing Kang Ho to run backward. Kang Ho noticed something in the hunter's jacket pocket and wondered if he was using an item to influence his awakened state. Even so, Kang Ho had another plan to defeat him. Then Kang Ho, dodging the Mukyun attacks, jumped the wall, and hung from the ceiling rod as it was an ongoing construction building, giving the hunter his chance to kill Kang Ho. Mukyun employed his mana-burning power to launch an attack on Kang Ho. He created a large mana fire and struck Kang Ho with it. Therefore, Kang Ho fell from the ceiling. Mukyun was happy to finally defeat Kang Ho, but before the hunter could say more, he noticed that there were many of Kang Ho's illusionary shadows. Seeing all this, Mukyun screamed and became frustrated. So, he released many bursts of mana fire at them, and all Kang Ho's illusionary shadows dashed toward him, and he didn't know which one was the real one to hit. Then Mukyun felt something behind him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the real Kang Ho grabbed him from behind and stabbed his dagger into the hunter's body, in the same wound where he had previously struck him. Mukyun yelled at Kang Ho as he stabbed him again in the same spot. After Kang Ho removed his dagger from the hunter, Mukyun fell to the floor. Mukyun moaned in pain, telling Kang Ho how dare he fooled him. Kang Ho replied that he thought Mukyun would fall for it. Mukyun thought it was an incredible strategy by Kang Ho. Kang Ho received a notification stating, "The constellation Master of Mobile Warfare is giving high praise to your attack strategy. A small quantity of constellation power has been sponsored to Kang Ho, resulting in a slight buff. Experience increase 0.1% was the benefit provided." Kang Ho had never anticipated receiving such sponsorship. Despite the numerous constellations observing hunters, acquiring a sponsor is notably uncommon due to the expenditure of constellation power involved. Upon receiving another notification from Dimension Looter, Kang Ho learned that this sponsorship, embarrassingly from a low-ranked constellation, purportedly diminished his dignity as the contract's holder. Kang Ho, with a smile, queried Dimension Looter about potential jealousy, reassuring him and asserting that selecting Kang Ho would prove to be the wisest decision. Kang Ho expressed his intention to leverage every available ability. Dimension Looter, addressing Kang Ho as lunatic, advised him to concentrate initially on the immediate prey. Kang Ho agreed and proceeded to stab Mukyun in the leg, eliciting a scream of pain from him. Mukyun, in turn, questioned Kang Ho's belief about the potential for change by merely capturing someone like him and reiterated his inquiry regarding Kang Ho's expectations for change. Kang Ho responded, clarifying that if capturing an individual like Mukyun could alter the world, Kang Ho would not find himself in the current situation. Following this, Kang Ho executed a swift action, driving his sword into the hunter's head, effectively splitting his body in two and resulting in his instantaneous demise. Following the execution of Mukyun, Kang Ho received a notification indicating the successful elimination of the target and the acquisition of Mukyun's contract with Fighter of Chaos, now under Dimension Looter's control, with no escape available outside of extinction or contract termination. Additionally, Kang Ho discovered he had inherited all abilities from Fighter of Chaos, including Seize Vision and Shallow Chaos. Kang Ho contemplated whether to also take Mukyun's items. Although not particularly fond of stripping men, he opted to start with Mukyun's clothes, noting that Mukyun possessed numerous items. Kang Ho had anticipated that Mukyun would be frugal for a level 50, likely investing heavily in items. Consequently, Kang Ho adorned himself with the mana string on his hand, enabling connection to the dagger for optimal throwing. Additionally, Kang Ho donned the hunter's shirt, modifying it for stamina enhancement, and wore Mukyun's ring, which augmented endurance, a vital attribute he deemed too valuable to discard. Furthermore, Kang Hu seized an item termed the Evil God's Talisman from Mukyun, recognizing it as an ideal buff item for himself. The talisman's power allowed for a state of awakening, where 1 mana is consumed every second and skill casting time is decreased. As Kang Hu reviewed the items obtained from the hunter on the panel, he contemplated selling all rank 9 items, anticipating a substantial financial return. Kang Hu then mentioned that reaching level 20 by the time he exited would render his situation ideal. He was convinced that the assassin's essential skills were just within his reach. However, upon exiting the building, Kang Hu noticed an unusual absence of monsters, pondering if he had misjudged the common habitat of thorn-toed rabbits. With a dagger ready, he surveyed his surroundings. Meanwhile, Young Jae and his team members were discreetly monitoring Kang Hu from a distant building. The female member of Young Jae's team observed Kang Hu's condition and suggested seizing the moment to overpower him and claim his possessions. Young Jae responded with a smile, affirming their course of action. A male team member awaited Young Jae's signal below, who, upon receiving the message, released thorn-toed rabbits from a sack towards Kang Hu, aiming to exhaust him with the creatures. The presence of blood on Kang Hu attracted the thorn-toed rabbits, facilitating their aggressive approach. Kang Hu, however, welcomed this development, recognizing an opportunity to easily ascend to level 20 by vanquishing these rabbits. Kang Hu successfully dispatched all the rabbits with his dagger, subsequently receiving a notification of his advancement to level 20, a moment he had eagerly anticipated. Following this, he received additional notifications, informing him of the acquisition of the Assassin class basic skill, Accelerated Stabbing. Due to the influence of his constellation, this skill was enhanced to Bloody Stabbing, capable of inflicting the bleeding effect on the target repetitively. Observing the ease with which the rabbits were eliminated, the female team member of Young Jae's group expressed concern. Young Jae, however, perceived Kang Hu's momentary distraction as their window of opportunity and attempted a surprise attack from behind. Nonetheless, Kang Hu evaded the assault at the last moment using his short-distance leap ability, pondering the identity and motive of his assailant and acknowledging the close call. As Young Jae's initial strike missed, he questioned the adequacy of his attack and launched another. This time, Kang Hu was ready, managing to injure Young Jae with his dagger by employing the bloody stabbing power. Yet, upon noticing the floating panel indicating a limitation of blood stabbing to 10 stacks, Kang Hu realized the necessity for repetition. Young Jae, unaffected by the attack, scoffed at Kang Hu, while his team members highlighted the futility of the effort, attributing their leader's resilience to his Berserker class. As the battle ensued, Kang Hu noted Young Jae's strength, but also the significant openings in his defense. Employing the bloody stabbing power again, Kang Hu inflicted further wounds on Young Jae, who, despite the accumulating damage, continued to mock Kang Hu under the belief that his Berserker skills rendered him invulnerable. Kang Hu, noticing Young Jae's overconfidence, saw an opportunity to exploit these vulnerabilities. Resolved to exploit Young Jae's lapses in guard, Kang Hu prepared to intensify his offensive, aiming to land at least 4 more stabs. In a swift maneuver, Kang Hu advanced towards Young Jae, who was momentarily caught off guard, revealing the critical juncture of their confrontation. Kang Hu employed his Seize vision power to obstruct Young Jae's vision, rendering him temporarily blind. Exploiting this opportunity, Kang Hu intensified his assault with the bloody stabbing power, delivering multiple stabs. Despite Young Jae's annoyance and his attempts to retaliate with random sword swings, dismissing the wounds as trivial, his vision eventually returned. Upon regaining his sight, Young Jae confronted Kang Hu, questioning if he had concluded his tactics. However, Young Jae soon experienced an unexpected and perplexing loss of strength, baffled by the debilitating effect of what he perceived as insignificant cuts. His team members were equally confused, unable to decipher the cause of their leader's sudden weakness. Despite Youngji's belief in his Berserker class's resilience, wherein sustained hits should theoretically enhance his strength, he found himself inexplicably faltering. Seizing the moment, Kang Hu utilized his abduction power to draw Youngjae closer, subsequently driving his sword directly into Youngji's chest. Kang Hu elucidated to Youngjae that despite his Berserker abilities, his human vulnerability to blood loss remained his undoing. The realization of Youngji's defeat prompted his team members to flee, acknowledging Kang Hu's formidable prowess. Kang Hu then retrieved his solatium from his jacket pocket, consuming it while reflecting on the cowardice of his adversaries and musing over the potential impact of Ozen's Hunter National Security Agency's closure on such behaviors. A notification soon informed Kang Hu of his victory over the target and the acquisition of Youngji's contract with Glutton of Blood. Kang Hu provocatively inquired of the Dimension Looter about the satisfaction derived from the Glutton of Blood, boasting of securing 2 such contracts in a single day. He further challenged the Dimension Looter, suggesting it might be time for another sponsorship, to which the Dimension Looter responded by labeling Kang Hu a lunatic.